meet the needs of the district and continue the discussion and hopefully move forward tonight, if possible, with a vote. If not, we will need to schedule some additional meetings. Okay, Dr. Vidal, I'll turn it over to you. We do have our full school committee meeting, school committee here today. And thank you for being here. And
Great.
Dr. Vidal, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I just want to thank you. We spent a lot of time together today and really crunching some numbers, and I feel like we have a pretty good plan moving forward. I appreciate the support. I want to thank the committee for some great discussions last night and just some really amazing conversations over the past week to really identify some things. So I took to heart what people said. We do have our business manager, Sam Rippon, here, who can answer some of the questions that were posed last week. I have a new updated proposal here. There's 2 pieces of paper. I'll go through them as a broad overview, and then we can answer any questions. The first one is the one with the color on it. The top has the blue line across the top. These are identified budget reductions. I heard loud and clear that we wanted to make sure that any further reductions were balanced. I did have the opportunity to speak with one of our administrators today who is looking to retire this summer. We had a very nice conversation. That employee is not ready to go public yet, but was open to us reducing the budget by a sum of $150,000, and we would be able to absorb the responsibilities of that administrator, reduce it from the budget next year, and be able to reassign the roles and responsibilities of that person. So the other positions will not result in anyone losing their jobs. We would be looking to keep the people that we have in place. We've done quite a bit of building capacity over the years, and our goal is to maintain this wonderful staff that we have. So in all, we have 12 positions, 12 FTEs that we'd be looking to reduce from the budget, as well as some supplies and whatnot that we had voted in last night. And then the bottom half here, based on those reductions, we see a calculated risk of a little over $500,000. And this is certainly a calculated risk. However, we would anticipate that this would come off of health insurance, and we would really look to continue to tighten our belts and make sure that we're paying that money out of the revolving accounts and things like that. That brings us within $350,000 of the mayor's number last night, and I think we're very close. And I think that we can still serve our kids very well with this budget. The second sheet is a plain white sheet, black and white. This is a proposed budget. It's if we get a supplemental appropriation, and from time to time, when there is some expiring grant funds, such as ARP funds and ESSER funds and things like that, or grants that were unused, the state claws them back. And they are able to take that money and sometimes of Chapter 70 and making districts whole that were hurt by that. And as the mayor pointed out last night, Peabody was one of those communities that received significantly less funding this year than we did last year through Chapter 70. If we were to get a supplemental appropriation, this document is our assurance of the priorities for the positions that we would bring back. This represents 11 positions, 10 in Unit A and 1 in Unit C, 1 full FTE in Unit C. It could be 2 part-time positions, but one full-time equivalent. And this would be our priority to come back, and if we do receive any additional appropriations, this is what we would give our assurances to, that this is our first priority to bring back. So with that, I'll turn it over to the mayor and answer any questions.
Great, thank you, Dr. Vidal. And I'm not going to rehash what I spoke about yesterday, but I did want to mention a couple of items to people that might be tuning in today that weren't able to join us yesterday. This year, and Dr. Vidal just touched on it, was last year we received $4.6 million in Chapter 70 and unrestricted general government aid. Of $4.6 million. This year, we received an increase of $1.4 million, $3.2 million less than the year before, certainly putting incredible strain on all of us, certainly not meeting inflation and all the other factors that come into budgets and the work that we do, and that put additional strain on us. I was not expecting that. I was expecting increases in the typical costs that we get hit with health insurance. But this year was 9.95%, approximately $1.5 to $1.6 million increase on our bottom lines, and that is by far the biggest health insurance increase that we've had, at least in 15 years. And that was something, although I was expecting, obviously, a health insurance increase, not to that degree. And then Essex Tech went up $700,000 on their bottom line payment that the city of Peabody is required to make, and retirement went up over $500,000. So some were expected, some were not, but the 3.2 less of an increase than we got the year before was pretty dramatic, and that's what's caused us to kind of take a step back and have to review tightly this budget and make some difficult decisions. I'm very comfortable moving forward with the 11 positions and the 12th position now that Dr. Vidala has brought up, because nobody loses a position, and that was obviously very important to me, I know to all of us, as we try to balance all the needs and all the demands on us. But I really did not want to see anybody that had worked for the city in our school department lose their position. And that's something that I'm comfortable with the hope that should there be supplemental, and certainly I'm hearing some positives that that's a possibility for us down the line, that we bring back those positions first. And I'm very comfortable that. And with Dr. Vidala's additional information regarding the administrative position, I'm very comfortable with the health insurance risk, along with out-of-district placement transportation. That's a number that I feel comfortable moving forward with. And certainly I think I'm able to make some increases on my end as we move forward. So thank you for that. And again, I didn't want to be long-winded, but I did want to touch on a few of those items just to give people who weren't able to watch yesterday some perspective as to things that hit us a little bit this year that we were not expecting, and again, put some additional strain on all of us. So let's open it up. Any questions or comments at this time from the committee members? We can open it up now. And actually, I'm sorry, I would like us, if we could, to please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. That's important to start a meeting, and I forgot to begin with that. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we are being broadcast live on Peabody TV, and the minutes of the meeting tonight are being taken by our recording secretary, Laura Bowe. It's not on TV yet? Okay, do we have the gentleman? Live? Okay. Okay, I'll open it up now for any comments, questions, school committee members. Mrs. Carpenter.
Thank you. Thank you for the additional information. I appreciate it. Thank you to the administrator who came forward to let us know that that person is retiring, and I wish them well. I have a question about, I guess you call it the pothole money. Is that what you call it? Okay. When do you find out that you get that or you don't get that?
So it changes every year, but usually when they meet in the summer, and I know Mrs. Dunn's familiar with some of this too, because it's the legislative group that does it. But once the budgets are finalized and they're voted in, then they look at what they have over the summer, and we would try to anticipate to get that before school starts. And so there's two real options that we have for additional funding. One would be the money that we would get from Chapter 70 because of the inflation rate, and that's through the legislators. The second is if they give us additional money for students living in the homeless shelters. They have not guaranteed that money for next year, but we do anticipate some kindergarten kids coming in. So that would be an option. If that was a different pot of money that we were to get, we could fund some other things that are in the appropriated budget, EL teachers, counselors, things like that, from that money, freeing up appropriated money for these prioritized positions. So we have two different options. We're hoping to hear about that before school begins, but there are two different places that we're really trying to put our advocacy and our efforts to see if we can get that additional funding from either one of those sources, and then once we got that, we would be able to bring it to the committee. And if it's less than the total number, we would prioritize which are the most impactful positions.
And given that, where it's hopeful that it's right before school starts. I know Mr. Farrell's here, and I'm not sure if you need to ask him to come forward or if you can answer this. What does the hiring look like with such possible short amount of time to fill these positions at the very last second?
So hiring is always a challenge, but we were fortunate. We got some really good people even mid-year this year. We do have a lot of people that want to work in Peabody. We have people who are certified teachers that are working in other roles as they're getting a new license, and so we can really try to work with them to do that. We have great relationships with Endicott College and Salem State and Merrimack around here. So it's a challenge, but it is a bit of an optimistic viewpoint, but I do believe that we could find people to fill those roles, especially, people want to work here. We don't have as many openings as we usually do in the past, but, we do have a pretty good track record with recruiting people, especially, sometimes we get late resignations in August, and if we have to hire someone, we've been able to fill that.
Okay, thank you. I'll yield for now.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Any other comments or questions at this point? Mr. Amico?
Great, thank you. Through the chair to the superintendent. Dr. Vidala, that proposed Peabody prep position, the elementary teacher, would that eliminate the elementary portion of the program?
Yes, this proposal would do that. And I'm open to going back to the table, see if we can find a different position, if that's the will of the committee. I know that has been something that we've talked about.
Yeah, if I could, through the chair to the committee, and I'm not stating this other than we were here and we did witness a video of a student. I believe he was an elementary student who was who was in the hospital with cancer and then was compromised, could not be in a building. I just think back at that student, and I'd have a hard time cutting a whole program, that portion of the program, for $70,000. I just think that, if we're going to keep that program, I would like to keep it whole, especially for a special circumstance where you have a student of ours who, even if he or she wanted to be in school with their peers, their medical condition kept them out. And I would hate to cut that program and just for a mere $70,000. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Amico. Mr. Swanson?
Thank you. I have two. First, actually both to Dr. Fidela. So, following up on Ms. Carpenter's question, inserting the readers, the reading teachers, the ELLs, those are easier, a little bit less disruptive. If we go back to the Brown School Elementary and we're able to hire that, how disruptive is that to do after school starts? If that's when we get our funds, that's when we get our hiring. How disruptive is that to class?
And that would probably be the first one to be prioritized, right, because it's class size. And so obviously starting at the start of the school year is ideal. We did this year, mid-year, just because of the sheer numbers, need to split off and add a third kindergarten class at the McCarthy. We got a wonderful teacher, and she was a teacher fellow for us, and she stepped right in. And we had, we did the work that we needed to do to bring the parents in and to let them know this is going to be a disruptive, but the benefit is you're going from 24 kids in a class to 17 kids in a class. And here's your teacher, and you're going to meet her, and it's going to be wonderful. And you're going to have this support in the classroom. And they were very much open to that. It was a challenge, sure, but I think the human element of it and the relationships, having those conversations and bringing people in, we've done pretty good with that, and we have really good relationships with our families and their understanding. And if there's a benefit on the other side of it, that does help. Ideally for that position, if we were going to restore it, we would look to do it before the start of school. But it's not unprecedented to do after the start.
Thank you. And I like how you would prioritize to be the first because it is the most disruptive. Second one is to Mr. Amico's point. Prior to the prep school, at any level, if we had students that were sick, that were not able to attend for a length of time, how were they compensated and how were they educated during those periods of time?
Yep. So we have a process that's known as home hospital tutoring. So if a student is hospitalized for an extended period of time and they're unable to come to school, or if they're homebound and they're unable to come to school, we provide tutoring. And so it's a little different model. Typically we've done it in person, but we could pay somebody to do an individual or a small group of students virtually if that was what they needed, on a case-by-case basis, pay teachers the hourly rate. It wouldn't be the same experience as the prep, but I think that if we're looking to be as cost-effective as possible, we could make something like that work through previous years. In other districts, they used a tutoring model.
Thank you. And just to the committee, I think in this time, it's a hard decision, but I think that the elementary position is one that is on the table for us. I think it's not an easy decision. It obviously affects students, but none of these choices are going to be easy for any of us, and that's why I asked these questions, so thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Anybody else at this time? Mr. Olympio?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Vidal, for preparing this. Just help me understand, really this wish list, this this potential money coming in over the summer. And I've had a saying, you never count your birthday money before you get it. And my fear is, and I'm a glass half full guy, but what I see going throughout the state, it's not trending in a positive direction. And I feel like that we're going to have more students come in September, October, and it's just the trend is going to continue. So my question is, wouldn't it be a better approach to be conservative and keep some of these positions and have smaller classrooms? Because we heard last year from people on the ground, especially at the McCarthy School, how challenging it was. So I'm really hesitant to pin our hopes on the state that they're going to have the state funding. Wouldn't it be easier to have our staff settled sooner than later? And then couldn't we always hire consultants to do administrative tasks? I mean, it's a whole, again, tough decisions. I've been in this room before where I voted to eliminate positions, and it's not fun. But all I've heard all last year was how challenging the classrooms are. And I don't think that's going to get better. I really don't. And I'm extremely nervous and pinning our hopes that the state gives us 50% of the wish list. I'm not comfortable with it. And again, I would much rather be in a position where we have extra staff in the classroom, and then if there's any administrative tasks that need to be picked up, I mean, the consultant, that's a whole industry, and it's a lot more cost effective for the district, and that really focuses on the classrooms. And I don't look at line items, and they're not just lines to me. I know there's people behind those, and I've been in this library before where I have to look at somebody and tell them that their position is cut. So I don't see it trending better come the fall. I feel like things are going to come up that we're not going to count on. I think we're going to continually have more students come into our district, and I'd rather be all hands on deck than the other way around. I think we can easily hire consultants to pick up the administrative slack, so to speak, versus finding teachers come September and October. And that's just how I feel. It's not personal, it's just how I feel. I'll yield for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Dr. Vidal. Thank you for your team. I'm sure it was a long night and day for all of you. Was for us too, I'm sure. Anyway, so let's make a vote for the central office administrator who's announced that they will be retiring at the end of the school year. Thank you for coming forward now. It makes some of these votes a little bit easier. Make a motion to reduce the budget by $150,000 and approve the reduction of the administrator who's retiring. So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. You've heard his motion. Motion was seconded by Mr. Swanson. Roll call vote, please.
Would you accept an amendment to that to just make a motion to reduce the budget by $150,000? I don't think we should include the language about someone retiring. It almost sounds like we're voting to let the person retire. I think we know why we're going to cut $150,000.
Ms. Dunn, I understand what you're saying, and I can reword the motion.
Thank you.
So make a motion to reduce the budget by $150,000 from central office.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hockman. Seconded by Mr. Swanson. Okay, any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman.
Yes.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Olympio.
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can... Thank you. So I just want to talk through some of these calculated risks that are, some of which are already approved and some of which are before us. It seems, from what I understand, last Tuesday there was a vote to reduce insurance by $371,358, reduce homeless transportation by $200,000, reduce special education out-of-district transportation by $50,000, reduce the reserve lane change line in the budget by $250,000. And reduce the facilities line for repairs and maintenance of our buildings by $400,000. So I'll take them some separately and some collectively. First, with regard to the facilities line, I understand, you know, if we have problems with the buildings, facilities and maintenance, that there's opportunities through capital expenditures through the city side where mayor's, my understanding is that the mayor would include some of those items as they present themselves in a capital budget that may, or fund them however he chooses to or the city chooses to. So I'm comfortable with that because we all know, we all sat here in the spring or earlier this spring, maybe late winter, and listened to every single principal in the district talk about the facilities. Historically, this is something that we cut, right? When we get to hard budgets, we cut our maintenance, and then we get in a position where we're in, you know, a much more catastrophic position than we should be. We know, I think the $400,000 this year is probably some fraction of what actually needs to be spent. I was hoping that we were gonna at least bring bathrooms into the modern age over this summer, and that doesn't look like it's gonna happen. But I hope it happens this school year, maybe over some breaks and maybe through some capital funding and things like that. I know we all get those emails, we get those text messages, those phone calls about a student or a faculty member not even be able to use the facilities, a basic human need. Here we are again. I don't know. We've already reduced insurance by $371,000. Guess we are told that the other funding source are revolving accounts that's going to offset that. In this next level of suggestions, central office, reduce health insurance by $69,037. I want some more information about that in addition to this calculated risk that's in the next tier of unpalatable considerations, which is $548,273. it can't just be through attrition. If we're cutting 12 FTEs, that's, it seems like that's, if we cut 12 FTEs and each staff member receives a $25,000 benefit for health insurance and dental or whatever they get, that gets me to $300,000 total. And I'm looking at being asked to consider $371,358, which is already off the books, and then an additional $620,000. It just, I don't know, I'm not a mathematician. I don't know how the math is working here. It just seems, I hate to throw old political terms out here, the math seems fuzzy, and I'm not suggesting anyone's trying to hide the 8 ball, but I don't understand it. So is someone able to explain that to me before we were able to consider it?
Yes, and this is something, Ms. Dockman, that we discuss every year, these items, because these are items that, when we're looking at our budget, there's sometimes you have to take risks. The reason that I'm comfortable with the health insurance risk is, and it's all dependent on those 12 positions. It would not be workable if it's not, or 12 FTEs in some way. But what happens, we have open enrollment every year, and we have 2 forms of health insurance you could take. One is an HMO, and one is a PPO. The PPO is a much more expensive health insurance plan, and there's different insurance rates for those plans in terms of employee contribution, where if you take the HMO, the city pays 85% and the employee pays 15%. On an Yes, and if it's a PPO, the city pays 80% and the employee pays 20%. This year in open enrollment, what we've seen in some of the numbers, it appears that there's more people taking the HMO plan. And that's why I feel we do have some wiggle room. It's a risk. We could be back here in May and, we're a couple $100,000 short. That could very well happen. We've done that on the city side as well. But I do think in light of that, that I do think it's a risk that I'm comfortable taking, but, that's just one person's opinion. It is a risk. I'd be foolish to say otherwise. But I do think that there's some potential savings on that, as well as some upcoming negotiations regarding those plans. So that's why I'm comfortable with that risk. If there's some FTEs that we decide on our end to close those positions for now. Is that helpful?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a little clearer, but I'm still, so what, and I think that.
I can speak to that first number, the 357. That's an exact figure. So that is money that was paid out of the appropriated budget in the past because the cafeteria fund was not a sustainable fund previously. We had a deficit when I first came in, and we had cleared that deficit, and now the way that the operation works, in large part thank you to Mr. Rippon, it's profitable, right? So it can self-sustain, so we can put the full number of the cafeteria workers in that fund, and we can put the full number of the Paso Avante staff in that fund. So we calculated the exact number that hit the appropriated budget last year that will be able to hit the revolvers this year, and that's that number. That's why it's a funny number.
Okay.
So that was the first risk, was less of a calculated risk and more of a calculated, which we did the math. These are estimates. So, we felt a little stronger about that one. That was why it was in Tier 1, because we had a funding source that would cover it, that we felt good about. There was a revenue source, and it's going to pay for an expense. These are more estimates, and that's why it's more of a risk, and that's why it's further down, and it's sort of tied to other things.
Okay, thank you. So through the chair to either Dr. Vidal or Mr. Rippon, the first Tier 1 reduction of insurance of $371,358, you're saying you're able to fund That's not a reduction of insurance, it's a change in the manner in which it's being paid.
Change in funding source, correct.
Okay, so, and there's funds available in some revolving accounts
Correct.
that's able to,
That now we have data to show that year after year, it's gonna generate the money to fund it, and it can be whole. That's less of a risk than we were in previous years, and moving forward, that's why we felt comfortable with that.
Okay.
That reduction.
so are you able to provide me with this, which revolving accounts? Where's the money coming from?
School lunch revolving account and Paso Savante revolving account.
Okay. And school lunch account is much more stable because the government is,
It's universal free breakfast and lunch.
right, so we're not relying on students or families to pay, we're getting it from a governmental
Federal and
source.
state government.
Okay,
That's
so,
correct.
so it's much more accountable. I wanted to say dependable, but I don't mean it dependable, I mean accountable. As a business manager, you can rely on it in a stronger fashion.
Predictable. It's
Right.
much more, it's much
Good,
more
okay,
predictable.
fine. So, and then, Dr. Vidal, are you saying that the $69,037 isn't much of a risk because your expectation is that those revolving accounts will be able to absorb an additional $69,037?
That's an estimate, and so it's not an exact figure like that, but we do estimate with, if we need to hire another person or how that is. We felt comfortable with a smaller number up top. The big risk is the big number, and that's what the mayor and I worked on today. We've talked with Mike Gingras and Mr. Rippon, and, we've talked to all the math minds in the city and said, what can we live with? These are the numbers that we came down to.
So with these two particular lines, nobody's losing insurance. Nobody's losing coverage. Everyone's maintaining exactly what they had, what they elect to have, what they choose to have, and we're just finding a different source to pay our portion of the contribution.
And if I could, Mr. Hockman, just to make sure I'm clear in terms of open enrollment. So every May, all the employees in the city have the opportunity to look at their health insurance, different insurance coverages that they could look at, and then make a change at that time. So we just went through our open enrollment period, and that's where we saw some trends that, again, made me feel a bit more comfortable. People can move from an HMO to a PPO to an HMO, look at other insurance opportunities. So that takes place every May, and that's what we just went through.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not necessarily at this moment prepared to take the calculated risk, but I am prepared, based upon the representations made tonight, to move to approve the reduction of health insurance from central office in the amount of $69,037.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Hockman. You've heard the motion, seconded by Mr. Amico. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman.
Yes.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Olympio.
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Amico.
Yes.
While running the risk of boring everybody here on TV, may I continue? Thank you. And I do want to go back to the reserve lane change reduction that was voted on already. We know that we have lane changes, and we have, thankfully, right, teachers or staff members who pursue further degrees and further education for the benefit of themselves and our kids. How are we eliminating this from the budget? Are we?
Yeah, and I can speak to that. So
Yeah.
we've never had that line. And so that's something that Mr. Rippon brought to us. And in the Big Wish budget, we said this would be something that's good to have because it covers some exposure. Typically with, high out, low in, people who, are paid at different rates, people who resign, things like that. Usually we are just able to absorb that, just the sheer size and the volume of our staff. It's worked out every year. And so that was in the big budget, and we thought, let's make sure that we're covered. That was a luxury, and that was an easy reduction for us because we don't have it in this year's budget, and we're okay.
Okay, so this does nothing to do with COLA that's built into the collective bargaining agreement, or
That was basically a buffer.
longevity?
It was a safety net
Okay.
that we can't afford. that we, you know,
Fair enough.
if we had all the money in the world, it'd be wonderful to have those safety nets. We don't have it in this budget, and we're okay. So that was something that we felt as though should be first on the chopping block.
Okay. So, thank you for allowing me that much time to bring up some thoughts and ideas and ask some questions. I will say, I think I'm kind of in line with Mr. Swanson and Mr. Olympio with some of the Tier 3 proposed reductions insofar as the elementary schools that are, or positions that, I understand what the mayor's saying. I understand that it's not easy cutting a position that has a body tied to it. It's not easy, and no one enjoys that. But at the same time, I need to I think I need to put a budget that's out there that funds staff that meet kids' needs. And while I appreciate that we have at least voted on at this point to reduce the budget by $219,000 and some change, and that is about 12% of what the number that I'm told we need to get to is. We talked yesterday about the chart that we received regarding the administrative structure, and there were some questions that I think I know I had and some other committee members had about what it would look like if there was some consolidation of some of those positions. And I don't know if you're prepared to talk about that, or if that may be for another later moment or another session. But those are things that I personally would still need to consider before I was able to reduce an ELL teacher or guidance counselor or reading teacher or, to Mr. Swanson's point, there is value, and Dr. Vidala, you hit it on the head. There is value for 17 kids to meet their grade 2 teacher, over the summer, because there's anxiety in grade 2 also. I don't know how many of the grade 2 kids at the Brown School, would have negative social emotional issues for not meeting their teacher. We do it for a reason, right? Because there's value in that. So while I respect Mr. Amico's position on a health-related situation that's unfortunate, I still look at, and I hate to do this, but we're at this point, numbers, right? If I have 17 kids who might be adversely impacted because they don't know if they're going to have who their teacher is, or they have to be put into a classroom with 25 kids as opposed to 17 for the first 2 months of the school year because we can't get a teacher over to the South School until November. And the effect that has on that school year, if I had to choose between the two, it's an easy choice for me. It would be a teacher at the Brown School and reducing I don't know if it's 11 or 12. I've gotten quite a few communications from prep parents and staff in the last 24 hours, as my position's pretty well known on this subject. So I respect, the information that's being provided to me, and I'm grateful for the people that provide it to me. But as Dr. Vidala said, unfortunately, it's not a unique circumstance, right? I wish none of our kids were ill or incapable of physically attending schools, but it's not. It's more, it's out there more frequently than anyone wishes it is, and there are programs designed for it. Anyway, thank you for the time, and thank you for listening to my thoughts and answering my questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mrs. Carpenter, then Mr. Miko.
Thank you. I had a couple of questions about some line items in the book. Dr. Vidala, under administration, I think it's 22. There's a line that is contracted services administration for 51,500. Can you tell me what the services are that we pay for that? I think it's line 22031.
Mr. Rippon, you have the backup in front of you? Yeah. Okay.
It's comprised of 5 different lines. One is an annuity contract for $7,500. One is the cost of the employee assistance program that we provide. Another is for Leadership Institute. Another one, a smaller one is for kitchen supplies. And then the last one is other contracts with respect to, I think, as I'm looking here, under MASS dues and the like.
Mr. Rippon, I understand all of the things you just listed, but when you did say the dues, I see another line that has central admin dues and fees. Are those not included in that line? The dues and fees.
I stand corrected.
Okay.
And so the other contracts I do know, and I'm looking where else we have budgeted for contracted services. Well, yeah. We have in the business office too. Just going back and forth. I know we do pay a consultant for public relations.
Is that the 15,000 that's listed for the other contract?
Well, that's in mine, but there's 30,000 up in administration. Yes, we do have a consultant that helps us with the grants, besides Kelly and besides myself, with respect to, grant reporting and things of that nature. It's not a big amount, but it's embedded in there as well.
So if you could, of that 51,500, how much of that money is other contracts such as, what did you?
30,000.
30,000. The 30,000 is, tell me again exactly what the 30,000 is.
I'd have to get back to you with particular, I mean, I can give you what it covers in general.
Yeah, we can go and look at it. It is level funded from last year, so we put in, it was 10 the year before, we put in 30 for whatever contracts that we needed, but we can pull that up and get back to you on exactly what that is. It's a level funded line based on the same amount of, that we put in this year.
I can wait.
I mean, it'll be next week. I mean, I don't have it in front of me to.
It will have to go into admins. We'll have to go into admins and see what we paid out of that line. I can't off the top of my head what that was, but.
What was this thing called, the consultants that we had to write papers for us? PR. Was it PR?
Again, that's part, that would be part of it.
Is it additional lawyers? And
No, it wouldn't be that. That's in its own legal budget.
so it's, I'm guessing,
It could be professional development or consulting services.
so consulting to assist with grants and
That's part of it.
PR?
Yes,
That's also part, yeah.
yeah, that is likely what it would be.
30,000 for those two contracted services?
And honestly, that's not a lot, I mean, it's not a lot of money relative to what contracted services cost.
Well, I think we have staff that do the grants, and I think we have a lot of very highly intelligent people that can write up PR notes.
I mean, honestly, in a district this size, you'd have a full-time equivalent doing each. I've seen it, but, you know, it's up to the committee to do what you,
At this point in time, I think keeping educators in front of children is more important than having an additional person to help with grants when we already have that on staff. And I think that we have a lot of intelligent people throughout our entire district who can write a PR newsletter or information. So I would vote to eliminate those contracted services in the amount of $30,000.
So I'm going to say this on this, and then I'll support your motion. If we're eliminating administrators for consultants, we're going to need to add to this line. If we're eliminating this, then, you know, I think it's one of those ins and outs.
But we're going to add to that line if we get the money after the budget.
Right,
Right
and
now,
so
we
if-
need to find the money.
Right, and so if we eliminate this, that's fine. I would be concerned about eliminating positions for people who are going to do this work now. You know what I mean?
But hiring consultants after the budget closes is if we get that magic fund money that some of us don't feel that confident about. So right now, I think that we have enough staff on hand that can write a letter about some issues in the district or handle grant issues for $30,000 to help us get to another teacher or para or, but my motion stands.
Okay, do we have a second on the motion? Further the motion by Mrs. Carpenter, seconded by Mr. Olympio. On the motion, Mr. Miko, did you have a comment on the motion? No. Okay. Mr. Swanson, did you have a comment? Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, Ms. Carpenter, thank you for bringing this up. I'd ask that you amend your motion to take the full 51, because if we're going to hope and that we're going to get this, I forget what you called the fund, the pothole, I think is what it has been called. I'd rather take a chance on this than a second grade teacher at the Brown.
so we cancel the employee assistance program for all our employees? That's what you're advocating, Mr. Hockman?
I'm advocating for a second grade teacher at the Brown School, Mr. Rippin.
Just putting it out there.
I understand that. I have other thoughts on ways to make the budget work. I don't know if I have the support for it, but I have other ways of making the budget work. And if we want to talk about we're taking away services from whom, we're in the position of providing an education to children. We're providing supports for children. And what I'm trying to do is prevent positions that are not necessarily filled right now from being eliminated from this budget so that we can provide services to children. Ms. Carpenter, I ask if you would be willing to amend your motion to include the full $51,000.
The EAP, we also on the city side have that. That's mental health counseling for staff and teachers and police officers and firefighters, and that's what the EAP is.
In that case, I would withdraw that request.
And I don't know how much it is on the
How-
city side, on the
well-
school side.
Well, how much, is it 8,000, is that 8?
That's 7,500.
Maybe just.
How much?
7,500.
Okay, so 51,000 minus 7,000?
And the annuity is a contractual obligation. So there's 15,000 in here that are contractual obligation. And everything else could be eliminated.
So just the contractual obligations and then
So the 51 minus 15.
the 51.5 minus 15.
No, and I'm okay leaving the mental health services in for staff. I mean, that's fine, that's reasonable. Whatever that number works out to be.
Leaving in the EAP program and the required contracted annuity. Okay. You amend the motion, Mrs. Carpenter? to that? 36.5,
So amended.
seconded by Mr. Olympio.
And could I ask a reference on the
of
line?
course, Mrs.
The
Dunn.
line number for that in the budget?
22031.
Thank you.
Any other comments on the motion? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman.
Yes.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Olympio.
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Amico.
Yes.
Can I still have the floor? Thank you. I'd like to go down to the postage line on the same page. It's $30,000. Looks like it's been that way for a little while. Do we really send that much postage out in this day and age? Can we reduce that line?
Mrs. Carpenter, can you refer that again, please?
$30,000 in postage?
No,
Wondering-
the line item or the,
It's like a few down,
It's 22,030.
that same paper, that same page?
22,039.
Okay.
I'm scraping up anywhere I can here, so do we really need $30,000 in postage? Most people use email. I don't know, I don't honestly know what you send, I don't know what you send out, so I'm asking, can we reduce it?
It would be just things that require, like certified mail, things like that.
Can we do half of that?
I would say no, between the rate increases with postage, we also pay for the lease on top of the
You pay for the what on top of that? What's that?
lease of the copier machine. The meter isn't free, we pay close to $4,000.
I see equipment listed at $4,000, a few lines lower than that, which I was gonna ask about. So maybe that's the lease you're talking about, so that wouldn't be included in. $22,045 was my next question. What is that lease? Which I'm suspecting might be that postage thing you're talking about. Because you said 4,000 and it's exactly 4,000.
I know, I don't know if the director of special ed is still here with respect to the. We mail a lot of items. We do, we have a postage line in special education for our. As well.
So you have your own
So-
line in special education?
So this would be another calculated risk if we took half of it. I mean, I think that.
Maybe a little
to
more
your-
than half, now that I
to
know
your
she
point.
has her own postage line?
I have to, I guess what I would like, before we do things like this, is I could run an ad on what
20.
we've spent in these lines, because the worst thing that we can do is, if we're on track to spend 30, and we cut it to 15, then we just created a 15,000.
And then we'll get that pothole money and it'll be fine, so I'd rather cut postage. And now that I know special ed has their own line, let's just make that postage line 10,000, how's that? And then we take 20 of that. That's a motion.
Second.
Okay, you've heard the motion by Mrs. Carpenter, seconded by Mr. Amico. On the motion, Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again, Ms. Carpenter. While Ms. Crompton is here, your postage line is $11,220. Is that, in your opinion, sufficient?
We usually come in around that. We estimate 4 packets per student in the department.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman. Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
It's posted.
Just doing the math. 15,000 at 68 cents a stamp. About 215 letters a year. Think you send more than that? Plus the postage meter, there's a charge for the meter.
That's listed down below.
I thought that 4,000 was probably for, do we lease the copy machines that are at the central office?
That's a separate line item.
Oh, okay. All right, then I can support this.
Mr. Olympio.
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes.
One more line, can I still have the floor, please? This is gonna be really small, but same page, central advertising, line 22034 for $1,000. What do we advertise for $1,000?
That's when we need to take out ads in the newspaper for like the, when we have the public budget hearing. Like there's things like that. It's short money, but I think it's 4 or 5 times a year. You know, that's what it's small.
Yeah.
But that is what that's for. There's certain requirements that we have to take an ad out in the newspaper for certain postings.
All right, I was trying to scrape a little more. I'll let that one go. Thank you, I'll yield for now.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Amico, I said you next, and then go to Mr. Olympio.
Thank you, through the chair to the committee and everyone here. Last night, I said, we have to get back to basics. Students, number one, teachers 1A, right? So any of these, and I thank Ms. Carpenter for bringing that up, if we are getting any pothole money?
That's what they said.
If we are getting any pothole money this summer, I'm willing to go right through this and cut whatever we can before we cut any of these teachers, before we cut any paras, and we can backfill it. And you know, just as an example to that postage there, it's $30,000. We're not using $30,000 in August, September, October, November, December. If by January, February, we need $10,000 for postage, come back to us and we'll try to get that somehow. So I guess my point is any line item that we bring up tonight, if I don't feel comfortable with the response that we're getting, I'd like to make a motion to cut that. Because this committee, and I won't speak for everyone, but everyone has said it, that we're concerned about the people in front of students who touch students directly, who are the one person, not 3 or 4 away, or not postage stamps away, or not manila folders away. So if I can't get a good reasoning for why we can't cut a certain line item, I say we cut it. And then we wait for the potential money coming in August, and we get closer to that number. I think it's easier to buy postage stamps than it is to hire a second grade teacher at the Brown School. So that's my advice. I'll yield. Oh, I have one question. Through the chair to our business manager or Dr. Vidala, there is a line item for $75,000. I believe it's diesel fuel. Do we have diesel? They're all diesel? And do we have one for gas? Do we have a line item in there for gas? Maybe it was the gas line that line that I saw. It was an amount of $75,000.
Yeah, that's where it's put in, but yeah, the diesel is our buses.
So that's where that 75,000 is in diesel trucks? Okay.
I mean, our yellow for in-district special education. Not saying, yeah.
Line item 21001, gas, diesel, utilities, $75,000.
Was that all used up through the chair?
I guess I'm gonna recommend you meet sometime and I can run all the reports and the admins year to date. Cause you know,
I mean, at this point, we're really not running under on any line. I mean, our budget is right up against it. At the end of the day, we can keep doing this, and you know, I appreciate it. We're not going to be able to make the calculated risks in health insurance that the mayor has agreed to unless we cut FTEs.
And I'm aware of that, but you know, we've pulled 2 or 3 through the chair. We've pulled 2 or 3 line items, and within those line items, I certainly didn't get a response of confidence that all that money was needed for those particular line items.
Well, let me be confident and get the accounting report so and I'll share it with you so that, you know, this is unfair. I gotta tell you, you know, on the fly.
Can we we have a recess, please? Thank you.
Yeah, we're in recess. Okay, let's resume. Yeah. All right, let's return after a brief recess, and Mr. Miko, you do have the floor.
Mr. Mayor, through the chair of the committee, thank you for that recess. Yeah, no, as I was saying, I just, again, we are hopeful that we get some funding over the summer before the school year, and as some of my colleagues had mentioned, you know, if we do get that money, we were going to use it to backfill some positions that are, as I said last night, those positions are in, we need those. You know, they're not filled now, but, you know, like I said, that Carroll School could certainly use another ELL teacher, another reading teacher, another counselor. There's no doubt. You know, they could probably use 2 of each. You know, they have over 600 students. Again, large number of ELL, a large number of first-generation students, and you know, reading, ELL, and counseling services are where those students, you know, really benefit from. So my point being is, if we have to cut some discretionary spending, I would prefer to cut some discretionary spending and try to get some of those positions back. And again, with the hope that we get some money through the pothole funding, and go from there. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Mr. Olympio?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick questions on some line items. First is number in tab 16, athletics. Athletics, line number 16006. And we didn't have this, it looks like last year, salary, game staff, and it's 14,789. What, it's a little.
Yeah, so those are stipends that we pay for people for games. It's not officials, it's our staff that we pay. We took it out last year, put it in the revolver. We were able to sustain that. We put it back in because it was something that we didn't want to take on too much liability in that, but it's certainly a number we could put back in the revolving account, if that's something you're looking at.
Okay. Let's see, then I'll just kind of go through, and we can revisit that, but that's tab 16, line 16006, and that's 14,789. Let's see. Tab 22, let's see. What line was it? Where is it? Actually, I'm sorry. One sec. It was, actually, I think it was believe under special ed. I'm sorry. It's tab 17. Let's see. Yes. There was an additional on line 17002, salary clerical, and there was a position added. A little explanation with that.
Yes, in January, we added a position. There was an executive assistant, and we split 2 positions. That was during the HR audit. They identified the need for confidential assistant in the office, and then to fill that position.
Okay.
So that's that position. I think we spoke about it in January.
Okay. Let's see. And how about under transportation, tab 20?
Is that the clerk as well?
Yeah, that is a clerk.
Yes, we did add that clerk. That was when we had found that because of the bus driver shortage, our people who were in the office, the director and the assistant director, were often out driving, and there was no one to answer the phones. We brought in a clerk at a reasonable amount, an AFSCME employee, to make sure there's always someone in there to answer the calls for the parents. And the other thing that was really good about that position was that they did the brunt of the work, the clerical work that was with respect to transportation reimbursement for circuit breaker, and we were able to increase our claim that way.
Okay.
So you know, that was a good position, a good add in the AFSCME unit.
Okay, thank you. For now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. Mrs. Dunn, then Mr. Hockman.
Thank you. I have a question regarding transportation, that it has gone up $100,000. Is that a definite cost for the coming year under the contract?
Sad to say, yes, with respect to, we're going into our last year with Healy. I'm fearful for
Yeah, so
'26.
that was contractual. You notice it's $1,000 a year, $100,000 a year. So we had the contract, and they had 2 3% increases annually. I think it was Dan Doucette who had negotiated that with the company. So you'll notice it's about the same increase year after year. So we got 2 additional add-ons at about an equal rate. So it was, I think it was 6%, I think is the total, 5.9. So it was
We had to
100,000 last year and
renegotiate
100,000 this
because
year.
of prevailing wage went up, and so we had to adjust. Dan and I fought hard to keep that. We're still very favorable compared to benchmark communities per day for what we're paying.
Okay, thank you. Is there any potential for savings if bus routes were combined? I know they're adjusted every year according to where students live.
I mean, we run 25 buses. One is solely for the homeless shelter, so it's really, we run 24. My understanding is, I mean, it gets looked at every year. Is, you know, and as far as I know, you know, given the vagaries of the streets of Peabody, we're running them about as efficient as we can, but certainly we always look to see where we can streamline.
Thank you. Is there any potential for savings on athletic transportation? I noticed that's gone up between the contractual and the overtime. It's going to go up $15,000 over last year, but it's over $80,000. Is there any potential to save money there?
I mean, I'm not seeing it. I think ideally, we get the athletic runs covered by our own people on overtime. We do that as best we can. Lisa Connors and staff really do a good job, and we're working with Dennis DeRochers to make sure that, you know, when the season is established, that we get that information as early as possible to our own drivers. Because again, it's cheaper, we own our own buses to do that. When that isn't possible, I think Salter is the provider of choice. And, you know, clearly that's much more expensive. So we'll continue to try, but I don't see
And so one of the downfalls of our athletic success, we have 11 Northeast Conference championships this year. There's quite a bit of postseason play. Our teams are doing well. We support them. So that is unfortunately a line that I wouldn't necessarily be comfortable with the success of our athletic teams cutting that, just because I know that you know, that was something that with the expense of transportation, you know, we want to make sure that we can cover those runs.
Nope, I understand. I will be honest, it's such a difference when you look at the transportation cost for the JROTC, which is $2,000, and they have quite a need for transportation as well, but they are held at a $2,000 fee. So I just wondered where, you know, where we could look at savings when you see that kind of a disparity, to wonder, you know, how to handle that. Okay.
I appreciate it.
I also have one other, and again, it's scraping at money, but under, you know, it's on page 25, under the district administration. Looking at the backup data, I noticed that under, sorry, hold on one second. I need a magnifying glass. Okay, under the dues and fees, line 22,041, in that grouping is the MASC annual dues of $46.16. And then below, we have dues and fees for school committee. Hold on 1 second. And that's $5,000, and I'm wondering if those are, I mean, they're two separate charges in the budget, but are they duplicates?
So one is the dues and fees, and I think one is the reimbursement for travel and conference. So there's the membership fee, like the dues that we have to be the annual dues, and then if we attend the conferences and things like that and travel, that's the 5,000. So there's the 4,600 for the annual dues, and then attending the conferences and the reimbursements and things like that.
Okay,
So those are the two separate kinds.
all right. Okay, I was thinking we could cut one. Thank you, I'm all set. Yeah, I mean, I would say cut the 5,000, cut the reimbursement. I would even say you could cut up above, it's $695 for a conference, but I wouldn't, in case someone wanted to go to the conference. It's really, it's professional development for the school committee, and it's necessary. When I go now, Peabody does not have to pay, because I am a member of the MASC Executive Board, so that expense is covered at a higher level. But somebody's got to come with me to some of this stuff, so leave that in there. And they may seek reimbursement for some things, too. Oh, always, they get, yeah. They get the
I could
good
go
weather.
I could go in November, but I try to save the district
Yes,
some money
actually,
and
the
not attend
superintendent
that
should
one.
come in November, too, but, yeah. The mayors do the same thing. May. Not quite June. Global warming's gonna help you guys. Thank you.
So is there a motion to,
Make a motion that we cut $5,000. It's line 22042.
Second.
okay, thank you. Further motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Hockman. Roll call vote, please.
Yeah,
Keep
Mr.
a dollar in that line.
Mr. Mayor, on the motion.
On the motion,
Yeah,
Mr. Hockman.
no, and seriously speaking, I mean, we're taking stuff out of the budget now that we may not need this year, but, and I appreciate Ms. Dunn making this motion. Can we put a dog ear this, actually everything we're kind of doing now, because, we may be able to sustain some of this for a year or two to get through some lean times, but we really should have the, not that, I'm glad that you're on the executive board at MASC, but that may not always be the case. And it's
No, it won't.
It is important that we do have a representative at their conference, so.
Yeah, and it's useful. I would say just leave a dollar in that line, so cut it by $49.99.
Okay, you've heard the motion by Mrs. Dunn, seconded by Mr. Hockman. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman.
Yes.
Mr. Swanson.
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn.
Yes.
Mr. Olympio. Yes. Mrs. Carpenter.
Yes.
Mr. Miko.
Yes.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. You all set?
For the
You
moment.
good? For the moment. Mr. Hockman.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll say this rhetorically, but maybe at the end of this, it's not a lot of money. Maybe we consider the 4616 dues for MASC. Well, I'll yield on that for a little while. Can we turn to, please turn to tab 13. So line 1301, 13001, and I don't know if Ms. Chase is the proper person, or Dr. Chase, excuse me, is the proper person. It falls under your curriculum instruction budget, which went from, that particular line has a 451% increase. Goes from $80,278 to $442,478.
Those are the curriculum materials, the high-quality materials that we've adopted. We paid for previously out of grants, and these are the annual subscriptions. These are the licensing. So the teaching and assessment supplies, that's our interreading. So these are the curriculum materials. These are the bills that come due now that the grant is no longer.
So the $442,000 is a more accurate representation of the actual cost?
Yeah,
We're
we've been paying it for 3 years. It's just now it's back in the appropriated budget.
Sure. Okay, so I'm going to go down the three subsequent lines, 13002, translation
The
services.
translations. So we were paying that out of a grant. But I mean, that's something that we need in our schools. So it's a consulting service that we can call, and we have minute-by-minute translation. We also have people who are live that we can use for translations in our schools. So if, parents come in and they require services, we have those people that we have on site to be able to translate.
So with this line in particular, I know that we've made a concerted effort in job postings to have people in buildings who are able to be bilingual or multilingual. And I'm assuming also that this line does not deal with IEP meetings, or that's a whole separate line. So, is this, I guess, is the difference, the $26,000 difference also through funding sources, and 30,000 is
Yeah,
about?
we've spent 30 in each of the last 3 subsequent years. It's just been paid out of ESSER.
And you're going to tell me the same, will provide me the same response for 13003 and 13004?
Yes. Yep. So all of those supplies and all of that stuff is just funded out of ESSER. So if we look back at the last 2 years, they were those big numbers in the initial budget, and then we said we're going to back out this much money for ESSER. That's where we put it. These were things that we just couldn't pull out this year because we need to provide those supplies for our staff.
No, thank you, that's fair. Thank you for that explanation.
You may see the same thing in staff development.
Yeah, I'm looking at 18002.
Yeah, yeah. So if we go to staff development, yeah, you'll see those PD stipends were paid the last 2 years. So that's for our staff members to provide PD to each other. And then you'll see the contracted PD. Those are people that we've brought in, the consultants, to run that high-quality PD. We were able to pay that $60,000. So you see that increase in that 18002. And then we did pay the tuition reimbursement, which is a contractual obligation. We paid that out of a grant last year, but we really have to bring that back into the budget. So that's when our teachers are able to take courses, and then we towards a degree change or a lane change. So all of those items in the staff development and the curriculum and instruction, those were accounted for in ESSER, and those are things that we do need going forward.
Thank you. If we can just go back to 18006.
So this is when we send our staff to conferences.
Yep.
So if they attend
that's
a
the
professional
12.
development conference, and there's some reimbursement in the contract. So if they want to, if the AP teachers want to go to a conference, or if civics people want to go to a conference, there's things like that. It's specialized. If they want to go to a conference, they can come back and present. We have that line item in there that we do allow them to attend a conference and then come back and share with their colleagues. So if I'm adding up back of the napkin here, I do think, to Ms. Carpenter's point, I do think we're about at a position, if that's what you're looking for. We may need a vote on the athletics to get there.
All set, Mr. Hockman? Mr. Olympio, do you want to make that motion?
Yeah, through the mayor. Let's see. Just make sure I get the right line. I'd like to make a motion to reduce line number 16006 in the amount of $14,789.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Olympio. You've heard the motion. It was seconded by Mr. Hockman. Roll call vote, please. Can you repeat?
Yeah, the full amount, yeah.
Roll call vote, please. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Swanson.
sorry, we spoke about this a little bit ago, through you to Dr. Vidala. Could you refresh, there's a new line on this year?
Yeah, so these are game officials. So it's our staff that we pay to attend games, and we stipend them. And last year, we paid that out of the revolving account, the revenue that was generated from user fees. The previous year, it was in the budget, but last year, we looked to reduce it. So this year, we put it back in, but it is something we sustained last year. So we just tap into the revolving account and pay for it out of that, similar to what we did this year.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Swanson. Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, and just to be clear, we're talking about scorekeepers and, we're not talking about, not referees, not officials and that.
Game officials, game attendants.
Yeah, thank you.
Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mr. Swanson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio, are you all set?
Yield for now, thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions at this time, Mr. Miko?
Through the chair, and I want to thank Ms. Carpenter for bringing it up during a sidebar. I believe we do have enough funds that we've just cut to reinstate a position on the third tier, and that would be the Peabody prep position, the elementary position, and $70,000. So I'd like to make a motion to reinstate that position.
Second.
Okay. Further motion made by Mr. Amico, seconded by Mrs. Dunn. Roll call vote, please.
Mr. Hockman?
No.
Mr. Swanson?
No.
Mrs. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Amico. You have the floor still?
Thank you. Through the chair, I do have a couple of other items that would like to get some more information on. In the business office, we have two positions. Well, they're actually attendance overtime stipends. It looks like one is, actually there's two of them for $4,651, and then an additional one for $4,651. I just wanted to get some clarification on that.
Yeah. So that is in the registration office around the beginning of the school year, around busy times when the influx of people come in and we need staff to stay late in order to process people to get them into school. That's what we tap into. Around state reporting, around the due date that we have to get in, it's our people in central office, AFSCME employees, paid at their contractual rate, to be able to do that, and they'll stay a couple hours late in order when times get a little bit busier. There's just two of them in there, and so that's what that funding is for.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Through the chair, if I could. Another line item, and I know this came up previously, and I know that we need this, but again, I feel like it's something that if we get that last minute money, we can reimburse it, or we can go to a different model, not have it contracted, actually not have it signed for that amount, but maybe contracted, and that's the school committee legal fees of $15,000. So I would make a motion to cut that line item. Again, if we do have the funding that comes in during the summer, I would be more than welcome to reinstate that, or to maintain that in some way to make it a contractual service. So moved.
Second.
Okay. You heard the motion by Mr. Miko, seconded by Mrs. Dunn. On the motion, Mrs. Carpenter?
Through the chair to Dr. Vidala, can you explain to me the school committee legal fees of $15,000? I thought we were covered under the city one. Is this an extra one?
So this is the support for Don Con. There's times where we have Title IX investigations, employee things. We do investigations, things like that, and they provide him with that support. So we've had a number of those where he has been tied up with some city fees and city items, and we've utilized them quite a bit. So I mean, it's a little bit of an exposure from a personnel standpoint for us to. I mean, it's so with HR, with Title IX, things like that. We do tap into them quite a bit. So
Thank
it's
you.
it's a reasonable amount. Yep.
I do remember now the conversation. They were relatively new, though. We've only had them for a few years.
3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Just based on the history and the previous conversations we've had about the additional legal fees, and I've always been comfortable with what we have, I would be in support of this. So I just wanted to clarify that it was the same thing that we had recently added a few years ago. Thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Amico?
Yeah, and I did notice on, thank you, through the chair to Ms. Carpenter, I did notice on our organizational chart that we do have, I don't know if it's a position or someone in charge of Title IX, 504, and bullying. So, no, it's my belief that
It's not an attorney. It's an educator. So it's just, this is a resource for us to make sure that we, are covered legally around, lawsuits and other
Well,
legal matters.
I'm okay with maintaining my motion.
Any other comments on the motion? Mr. Hockman?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Miko. Through the chair to Mr. Rippon or Dr. Vidala, are we under, I'm assuming we're under a retainer agreement with whatever law firm we're dealing with, is that?
It's an hourly rate, so we just, so, you could reduce it, say by $10,000, and if we overspend it, I'd have to come back to you and say, we have something going on, and I can justify it, and here's the hourly rate, are you okay with going over that? It's a calculated risk, as we've been doing.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to make sure that we're not eliminating this opportunity by reducing this in half. It's an hourly rate, so thank you.
Okay. Roll call vote, please.
Oh, one question. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
on the motion, Mrs. Dunn?
Sorry. Through you to Dr. Vidala or to Mr. Rippon, do you know offhand what we've spent, like last year or this year, out of that amount of money? How close does it come to?
We're pretty close every year. So, there's specific cases that we get, we're in the 10 to 15,000 each year.
Okay, thank you. All right, thanks.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. All right, roll call vote, please, on the motion.
Mr. Hockman?
Yes.
Mr. Swanson?
Yes.
Mrs. Dunn?
No.
Mr. Olympio?
Yes.
Mrs. Carpenter?
Yes.
Mr. Miko?
Yes.
Okay. Any other comment? Mr. Miko, you still have the floor if you,
I'll yield at this time, thank you.
any other comments, questions?
Could I ask a question?
Please, Mrs. Dunn?
Would this be the time, or would it be at our next meeting, to request that the school committee send a letter to Senator Lovely requesting that she support the increase in the inflation factor in the Chapter 70 funding? There are amendments seeking that increase. That's the money, that's the pothole money that we're looking for. I mean, I keep calling our office and texting, and we could all do that as well, but I would do whatever the committee wanted, but I think we need to do that so that at the state level, they understand how difficult this truly is, to be able to carry out all of the mandates from the state, to be able to continue the good education we're providing, and to stay on this track.
Sure, Mrs. Dunn, that's always appropriate, yeah?
I will volunteer to write the letter, and I will be very respectful.
We know that.
I know.
Did you want
But
don't even
I'm
know if-
just I'm kidding about that part. I mean, you know I would be, but I think it might help. I do know that there are some resolutions coming our way from other school committees, and that MASC is advocating daily at the state level for that increase in funding. But it always helps when we can put a picture to that effect, to show what that kind of a cut did here, and to show how it impacts on the school. So I'm just putting out there, we can talk about it at Tuesday's meeting also, and that's no problem at all. We have time. Well, hopefully they'll give us the money by Friday, but we probably have time to wait till Tuesday.
Thank you, Mrs. Dunn. Anybody else? Mr. Hockman?
Thank you. I'm looking at line 29006, which is a technology line, and it looks like in the backup it's showing the difference. The substantial difference in this line is a Chromebook lease for grade 2, grade 5, grade 8, grade 11, a Unit A refresh for Peabody Veterans Memorial High School, and a Unit A refresh for Higgins Middle School. Can you get an understanding as to where this is, what this is about?
Sure. So when we went to one-to-one Chromebooks, we found it more cost-effective to lease units so that, we, every other year or whatever, so we have a 3-year lease, and then they turn them in, and then they get another 3-year lease. So that's, new leases that are coming on. So when we started that, they were at K, now they're 1, and so the 2nd grade, the 5th grade, so that's why you see it staggered that way. At the high school, the kids keep the Chromebook for the 4th year. We don't replace it for their senior year. And then Chris Mitchell and his team are on a rotational basis for staff upgrades. So during COVID, we were able to use a lot of grant funding to pay for staff upgrades. Those are now aging, breaking. We want to make sure our staff has the most up-to-date technology. So that's what that is.
Thank you. 2 hours into this, it looks like we've got to about 15% of our $1.9 million number. I, for one, don't want to, I understand that there may be some more information that's necessary, and we may need another meeting, but I for one, don't want to be here till midnight. I think we have a curfew of 11 by rule anyway that we put in place a few years ago for this very reason, budget reasons. So we got the organizational chart for administration, and I think yesterday I had asked, what does it look like if we consolidate some positions? And I talked about a few specifically. And I don't have dollar figures on all of these positions because I think several of them are paid for either through grants that aren't in, that information isn't in our budget book, or through revolving accounts. And I talked about opportunities that we may have, and I don't know because I don't know what the grants look like, of utilizing the funds for those salaries for other things that are embedded within our budget, our operating budget that's before us. And certainly revolving funds we have, I think, unfettered control over. I don't think, as long as it's used for...
So I can speak to that just briefly. So there's really 3 types of funds, I think, that you're talking about. There's revolving funds, which we collect. So, for example, cafeteria funds need to be spent on cafeteria items. Once we exhaust that, we can't pay for a reading teacher out of the cafeteria fund. Similarly, transportation, things like that. One thing that we did with the early childhood is we did take someone off of, we took a teacher and 2 paras off of the appropriated account from the preschool and pay for them out of that. That was a savings that we did in Tier 1. So there are some, as you said, flexibility with revolving accounts. The next thing is the federal entitlement grants. Some of those grants, we have obligations that we can't supplant. So in other words, we can't take something that we've been paying for out of the appropriated budget and supplant it into that budget. We'll get audited, and you know, that's one of the big things that we sign off on in the assurances. Those funds are to supplement the appropriated budget, not to reduce the appropriated budget in order to pay for something we've paid for in the past. And then the third bucket is the one-year funds, like the homeless funds and things like that, which do need to be dedicated to things for that specific purpose. So, you know, those are sort of the three buckets that we have, and some of the strings that are tied to that.
Thank you. That's certainly helpful. So for revolving accounts, we have revolving accounts for a couple of early childhood programs that we offer, and they're valuable programs, and I'm glad that we offer them. I wish we offered more. I wish we finally got to universal pre-K, because it's important, and I think it's beneficial. And we have two directors of two different early childhood programs, and I brought this up last night, what it would look like if we had one director overseeing both programs, and if we were able to do that, would we be able to use the salary and benefits that we're paying for the second director for staff members or other items that are embedded in our operating budget?
So it's complicated because they're separate programs in separate buildings. Right now, Passos is a different license. It's an EEC license. They're spread out over 3 buildings. We just added, this year we added one to the Carroll School. We're also at the South and the West. And that's a different license. The integrated preschool will be housed at the center school next year. And, you know, that's a separate revenue source with funding. They're very different programs with different oversight. The integrated preschool, with the needs of the children, has someone on site every day, all the time, full-time, dedicated to that site because of the needs of the children. The Passos position travels, and there's a different need. So, you know, it is possible to do that, but they are different functions. So, I mean, I'd be open to anything, but I do think that it's a challenge, and there's unique items in both areas.
No, I appreciate that. I'm sure everybody that works for us works hard. I'm not saying that they don't, and I'm just trying to find some funding sources. And what are we? I think. Actually, I don't know, and I certainly don't want to broadcast, but maybe we can get a supplemental statement as far as what we're talking about in terms of salary figures, so that we can.
So I can tell you that the integrated preschool is a Unit B position, and so that salary may have been in the budget 3 years ago.
Yeah,
that number might be there.
I'm more familiar
The other one is 75% of that, maybe, on a non-contractual, because it's a different license.
Yep.
It doesn't have an administrative license. It's more of a director through EEC, and so it's not the same level of compensation.
Yeah, no. You know, and I've been here 15 years. It's hard to say that. And I don't know that I've ever seen any accounting from one of these programs. It seems to be something that it's a vital program. You know, I think that they do great work. I just don't know salaries of staff members, or and it falls under our purview. I don't know if we set those fees at the same rate that we set the integrated preschool, or if it's a separate rate. And
It's a different rate. We raised it to $200 a week last year. Not last year, maybe the year before.
Yeah.
But recently we raised that one, and that's a fully self-sustaining program.
Yeah.
The integrated preschool, we do funds from the appropriate budget. It's a requirement because of the special ed component of it.
Yep.
So they are different. You know, I can't really speak to what it was before I was here, but we have, you know, cleaned it up, claimed the students now, and have a little bit more oversight. But I know it's been a 30-year city program.
Yeah, no, it's been around a while. And like I said, it's a vital program. I'm happy that we have it. It just kind of seems to be one of those programs that doesn't get a lot light shed at our level on it. So, I also talked yesterday about what's listed as student services. I don't know what that is. And there's a whole bunch of boxes below that, attendance supervisors and data information specialists and education stability liaison and so on. But there's a box that says student services.
Yep.
And what is that?
Yep, and so that is it's the needs of non-special ed students in our buildings, right? And so it encompasses bullying, discipline, mental health services, school safety. So a lot of the things that we've done around school safety have fallen under that bucket, and are now under student services. The influx of the homeless students, that's been the homeless liaison. So that is fully funded from the homeless account this year, just because of the sheer volume of the work that's been done in that area. That person, did go to another city, meet individually with those 25 students, and those students have returned and did not impact the McCarthy School. So, that's something that is not in the budget because it's paid out of that grant, because of the influx of the need there. And, I think if that were something that money dried up and were to return to the budget, it would certainly be another question for the committee. I do think at this time, with the significant amount of support that's happening now, it's needed. We have been recognized by the Secretary of Education. We were on WBZ, really doing good work. Director of Student Services was asked to present at the homeless conference for the city. So it has been a really supportive position for our city and for our families.
Yeah, no, Doc, I don't disagree. I mean, these are challenging times, and much more so because of circumstances that are beyond our control. And this is a person that I assume reports to Dr. Higgins. Yeah, but I also see that we do have a student discipline, school safety box. Is that a different person, or is
That's not a person.
that's not a person?
No, that's not a person.
That's just a role
That's just a role that
taken on.
falls under there, yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's not, it's more of, those are tasks. It's unfortunate, there's not a person attached to that.
Okay. And then I see a box for kids only. Is that
Yeah, it doesn't cost us, but somebody needs to be the liaison to them, and Dr. Higgins has taken that on as well. So, it's more things, so I think that's moved since '22. It's been something that he oversees in his role, and it's just making sure that if there's any issues that come up, because there are students, we still have oversight, and we need someone to communicate directly with their staff.
Thank you. Yeah, and again, I think they provide a vital service. So, and then I see on I think Dr. Chase's side of this chart, operations assistant.
That's one of the clerks in central office.
Okay, and then the director of teaching and learning digital technology. Is that outside of the technology budget, or is that within the technology budget?
That's in the central office budget.
Okay, and
That,
what,
so those are two positions filled for the STEM director and humanities. So director of teaching and learning for humanities, director of teaching and learning for STEM. They have separately half funded through Title I, half funded through the appropriated budget, worked very closely with Dr. Chase to implement new curriculum. So for example, the humanities person did all of the civics support and things like that. STEM does National STEM Honor Society, curriculum adoption for middle school this year, some of the curriculum adoption that we're doing at the high school. So we're really supporting the work that Dr. Chase does with the amount of grants that she has. Being able to have some oversight there has also been helpful.
okay. And those, I think, two positions that we're talking about are at least partially in the operating budget
Correct,
and partially through grants?
correct.
And is it do you know the
50/50.
50/50? And do each of those grants that we're paying 50% of the salaries for these two positions,
Those are entitlement grants?
would we be able to utilize those funds for other items that are already in the budget?
I don't believe so. That would be supplanting the federal Title I budget. I guess what is the question?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, no. Or if we were to consider not funding those roles through the grant that are paying half of the salaries of the two positions, I don't know how much, the two positions we were talking about, I think were the operations assistant and the director of teaching and learning.
The operations assistant is the clerk?
That's the clerk, no.
So you're talking about director of teaching and learning?
Yeah, director of teaching and learning and digital technology. For those positions, if we didn't use the grant to pay for half of each of their salaries, would we be able to use those grant funds for other items that are already in our operating budget?
So each year you need to go through that process, so we would need special permission from DESI, and they would have to audit that to see what they would approve or not.
Those are ones that are tied to supplanting. So if
Yeah.
something is in the budget, so for example, that this is the Title I grant, we cannot put, say, for the Title I schools, we have 5 Title I schools, we can't put the reading teacher from the Title I school in there and put a reading teacher in the Burke budget. So we need, if we have a reading teacher in the Burke budget, we need a reading teacher in every budget, and then at Title I school, we put a second reading teacher in the Title I budget. So that's what we've done. So we have to have a baseline support. So the idea of supplanting is that we can't take away from that. So we have to have the same support for all of our schools, right? One reading teacher in all of our schools. And then Title I schools, the grant funds can supplement that and add an additional person. So that's what we have done.
Okay, so for example, the Carroll School's a Title I school, and we're looking for an ELL teacher, a guidance counselor, and a reading teacher. Would those salaries be able to be paid for through the grant that's paying the salaries of these two positions?
I don't know if that would be supplanting. That's what we would have to check into.
Okay, so please add that to the list of things that we're checking into, and it does look like we are going to need another meeting at least, because those are significant items for me, and I prefer to get the information on it to make a determination as to what's possible before I would make an irresponsible vote, because I certainly don't want to do that. And then and I don't know if it would be Dr. Higgins or, I don't know who's doing this check-in.
If I could just add, I mean, we've been celebrating a lot of great things, and we have 11 NEC titles. We have a director of athletics. We have a award-winning state championship performing arts department. We have a performing arts director. We're struggling on MCAS in ELA and in math. We need a STEM director. We need an ELA director. We're winning in sports, and we're winning in performing arts, and we need to start winning in education. We need to start winning at MCAS. We need to start making sure more kids pass that, and so we need support. When you think of an administrator, think of support for teachers and kids. We can't run the district with no administrators. We hire people to support our teachers, and without that, it all falls apart. And so I know we're trying to do it whatever we can, but we started off the meeting saying we don't want to take away a position where there's a person there. And now we're looking at positions where there are people. These positions that are on my list, these positions that are on my list are positions that we had either added or people that have resigned. So I was advocating for adding when we had all the asks of the principals. But now I can't advocate for adding because we don't have the money to add. And so I don't want to take away somewhere else and hurt the district and hurt the support that we have for our teachers and our staff.
Dr. Vidala, respectfully, don't throw that on me. We have a budget that we need to make, and we're talking about $20,000 in line reductions and $36,500 line reductions. And I respect my colleagues for bringing up those items because there are ways of saving some money within the budget. But we're charged with making a shortfall of $1.9 million. And I can't, while I respect the work that administrators do, and I respect your supporting them because I think that that's part of your role. And it's part of my role because I want to support administrators too. But what I can't support is not having a reading teacher for a kid in first grade or second grade or third grade that's already behind reading level and say to them, well, we have a curriculum instructor for you, but they're not going to be in front of you. And you're not going to be able to get the services that you need. And maybe we'll wait till you're in 2 years or 3 years down the road where we have enough money to be able to support this position. And hopefully at that point, you get back to reading level in 2 or 3 years. I'm just, if I'm flipping the coin, and I've been up front from the beginning. I don't like cutting people's jobs. I'm not here to do that. But I'm charged with $1.9 million in providing services to kids. And I realize that we have a lot of successes in the district, and it's because of some administrators, but it's also because of people in classrooms. And if I get to make that choice, and I do get to make that choice, I'm putting people in classrooms. And all I'm asking for is if we're able to, and I don't even know if there's any support for what I'm suggesting among my colleagues, but if we're able to, I'd like the information to know whether or not I'm able to do one thing or another so that when I make a motion that may fail, I'm certainly permitted to make a motion that fails. I've done it, I think, historically, at least every year that I'm on the committee. I'd like to at least know that I'm making it in an educated fashion. And that's one of the reasons that I've asked for more budget meetings, and it's a process, and we do, it's like learning. You know, it's like learning. Every student learns differently. We all acknowledge that, and we provide, differentiated instruction for that. We as committee members, I think also, and administrators, go through the budget process differently. And, some of us need more time than others, and I'm one of those people that kind of try to get through the information and ask for, and to Mr. Rippon's point and slight outburst earlier, it's not fair to him to sit there and field questions from us, looking for information that he doesn't have at his fingertips, and I don't blame him for that. He's got no, it's not fair to suggest that he's going to have all that information available to him tonight. So, but we do need this information because I, for one, I need this information. I'm not going to speak for anybody else. I need this information because I need to know whether or not I have a choice between what the Tier 3 reductions are that aren't palatable to anybody are compared to, Hockman's tier of reductions, because I need to evaluate that to determine what I think is best for the students and the staff within our district so that I can make a vote, I can make a determination. And that's all I'm asking
I
for.
appreciate that. I've made my recommendations. They're hard recommendations. I don't like them. I've said my piece. I'm not comfortable putting my name on a federal grant that supplants. So I can't sign off on that. I can't give that assurance.
Dr.
I'll
Vidala,
follow the will of the committee, but I can't put my name on a grant that supplants from the appropriated budget.
Stop. I'm not asking you to do anything that's unlawful or illegal. I'm asking you for the information so we can make a determination as to whether or not we can do it. I'm not asking you to doing anything to jeopardize your integrity. You're an honorable man, and I'm not asking you to risk that for anything that we're going to talk about tonight or in this school district. Not at all.
Okay, any other comments, questions? Mr. Amico.
Thank you, through the chair. I just wanted to shift, I hate to bring up the center school, but because the center school is closing, and I know all the employees are moving through the chair to the superintendent or the business manager, I did notice long-term substitutes and short-term substitutes. They were cut. Were they moved anywhere else? Because I can't find an addition to any of the other elementary schools in regards to short-term or long-term substitutes.
I believe they were level funded in all the other 7 schools.
And through the chair, I guess that's my point then. Were these at the center school completely cut? or were they moved anywhere else in the budget? And if they were anywhere else, if they were moved anywhere else, they're not reflective in the substitute lines at the other elementary
They
schools. So
weren't.
I just wanted to see where they were.
No, we reduced it.
They're totally reduced, okay.
Correct.
Thank you.
Why don't we take a brief 5-minute recess? Thank you. All right, let's resume here in 1 minute. All right, let's get back here, and I think it's clear we're not making very much progress, and we're going to need additional dates. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move forward with wrapping up this meeting shortly. I want to go around the room to everybody, get their requests for what additional information they would like for the next meeting. I am available any day to meet. Obviously, though, that's very difficult with this holiday weekend. Either we can carve out some time on Sunday, which I think would be very difficult to consider, or we just load up for a pretty lengthy meeting on Tuesday. But I don't think we're making any progress tonight. I don't see anything happening. We have major decisions to be made here, and we're not even close. So and just have a full budget meeting. Maybe that's what we can do. And we need to look at, Dr. Vidala and I will need to look at, in terms of the public hearing, how that relates to providing the documents to the city council and all of that. We need to figure out, we'll have to talk to the city council president and chair in terms of scheduling, which can be done. But I don't want to continue on much further tonight. I don't think we're achieving much. So what I'd like to do, though, is go around to get everybody's opinion as to what additional information they would need for Mr. Ripp and Dr. Vidala, and which I think is important information to get. And but I want to try to go around and get a sense of what we're looking for, and then I want to wrap up. So, Mr. Hockman, why don't we start with you? Any additional information at this point that would be helpful for you? I know I think we're going to look into those items that you've just brought up in those questions you asked. But then, anything further at this point that you think you might need?
Just, I think the only other thing is, I know we talked about the preschool programs. Do either of the current directors have licenses to operate both programs?
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hockman. Mr. Swanson, anything on your end?
None at this time, thank you.
Okay, Mrs. Dunn, anything on your end?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, great.
This is actually just the structure of the budget book. Under tab 3, we have special education. And under tab 17, we have a whole nother duplicate of special education. Is there a reason for that? They're very similar, but I'm going to be really honest. I'm not an accountant or anything, but if I was to sit at home with my calculator, what I would have done was to flip through every section and just add the bottom line. If those two sections have been added into the book, they're both over $1 million, then we can take $1 million out. I have no idea. I always have hope. So, Mr. Rippon, could it have been added in again?
No, but I like your
tried, I
thinking.
tried.
But I do want to give you an answer with respect to why, like at the elementary level, that we have special education budgeted for the teaching staff, the paraprofessional staff. And we do add them together. I work with Shannon to make sure we meet maintenance of effort, so we add all of it together. However, for the end of year reporting, it's required that, and what the federal government's pushing on the state and the state government's pushing on us is to be as granular school by school. They want to see very little in what's called district-wide. And so that's why you're seeing budgeting like that.
Well, actually, Mr. Swanson pointed it out to me, we were given an adjustment when we first got, this is, I'm looking at the tabs in the original budget book. So this is the original budget book. I didn't insert anything into it, and that was why I was confused, because it is the same budget lines. There's only a difference of about probably $3,000. I don't even know. But when I realized that, I thought, well, maybe. Thank you. Check it anyway, though, please.
Okay, Mr. Olympio?
Yeah, just maybe to echo Mr. Hockman's request, a list of the grants, the salaries that are paid from the grants, and if there's any side notes that shows restrictions, you know, what are the restrictions? And that would be extremely helpful.
Thank you. Mrs. Carpenter?
Thank you. The same that my colleagues have requested, and if we could possibly look through some of the line items, if there's any other contracted services that we can chip away at and have administrators pick that up for a while, that I might have missed tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Carpenter. Mr. Miko, anything on your end?
Thank you. Through the chair to the committee, I would like to see, and Mr. Hockman brought it up earlier, and I think someone had asked about the organizational chart, and we thought that that was a person, but it's just items that are in a box. If we could get this streamlined, I would just like an organizational chart based on positions, obviously no names, and the salary right next to it. So we could have, you know, a drop-down like we have here, but there are many more boxes here than people, because some of these things are not people, they're just items, responsibilities. So I just want people and salaries.
Thank you, Mr. Miko. Good. Oh, on that, Mr. Hockman?
Yeah, on that, these are public funds, these are public documents. I want the names of the employee, I want the salaries, and I want the funding source for the salary, whether it's by grant or by our operating budget. And if it's by our operating budget, please tie it to the line that it comes out of.
All right. And I think I made a mistake here in terms of when to start the meetings, and I wanted to accept some responsibility and apologize because I delayed. Dr. Vidal, I know all of you were ready to have these meetings. I tried to hold off a bit to try to gather more financial information on my end. So it's put us all a little bit under the gun in terms of having these meetings, and really that was my fault because I was delaying, hoping that there was some changes that were coming in the Senate versus the House budget versus the governor's budget. So it puts us all a little bit more under the gun, and I apologize to everybody for that. That was certainly not Dr. Vidal and his team, and it was certainly not any of you. That was on me, just trying to delay to gather more information, to try to make this a little bit easier. So I apologize that we're all under the gun here a little bit, and I'll say the same to the city council because that could adjust their schedule as we do it. So, all right, let's quick, Mr. Swanson. Yep.
One item. Just for clarification, yesterday, did we already remove the $50,000 from did we already vote past? Thank you. That's it.
All right, so let's plan for Tuesday night, time to be determined. But I think Dr. Vidal and I will talk about maybe holding off on the regular scheduled school committee meeting that night in order to have a very full session. But we'll coordinate and figure out the time and try to get answers to some of those questions about notice requirements and all that type of stuff. So,
Motion to recess.
great. Thank you, everyone.